Y'all, welcome back to Kentucky Fried Wargaming, where two guys who aren't qualified to talk about anything decide to talk about a game with hard math and chance. I'm Joe, and there's no John this week. John, unfortunately, while okay, was in a car accident recently and is recovering. No broken anythings, no terribly torn anythings, thankfully. Just beat to crap and back. As you can imagine, how sore you are after a car accident is hard to imagine, especially if it's at over 40 miles an hour. So please forgive me if you do see a couple of videos in your feed where it's just me. I'm going to be here buying some time for my buddy to relax and rest, and that means I am entirely unsupervised for my topic choices. And with that being the case, all concepts of algorithm superiority are out the window. I'm just going to talk about things I think are cool and important to people's gaming enjoyment. And today that means we're going to discuss a game design concept that is a little finicky, but I think once you understand what it is, you might see in your own wargame experiences and find is maybe foundational to how you enjoy these games and why you enjoy these games. And that is the idea of Ludonarrative Dissonance. It sounds like a lot, but it's very, very simple. To break it down, it is based on the word ludus, which, as you can imagine, way back, game. Ludus just means game. So Ludo, narrative, as in story, dissonance, just means that it is a clash of storytelling. Well, it's a clash of story and action choices in a game. The things that you have control of and the things that you not have control over, that you do not have control over, don't vibe and creates a moment of discomfort or displeasure or might pull you out of the game altogether. This was coined in 2007 by Clint Hocking when discussing the game BioShock. In a game design interview. And without getting way too into the weeds, ludonarrative dissonance was used to describe a conflict that arose in the BioShock game series as he was playing it. BioShock, wonderful game, highly recommend you play it. But one of the mechanics in BioShock is that as you explore this underwater city of Rapture that is sort of gone to shit, there are mutated young girls who wander around the city of Rapture and gather resources that are very, very valuable from dead bodies. And there are times in the game where you will come across one of these young girls, and then you, as the player, get a choice. You can either consume this girl and kill her to steal all of her resources, and you become more powerful, or you, as the player, get to make the choice to purify her, to redeem her, to save her, but you get almost no resource in return. So every time you find one of these girls, you have a choice to make. Whether you are going to be a more altruistic antagonist or you're going to be a more selfish antagonist. And it sort of hinges and dovetails with the idea of the game of free will, which is something that comes up over and over and over again as you play through the story. So it all feels very cohesive, interesting, and compelling, because all of these moments, you get to make the choice here. You get to choose how you want to behave in the city of Rapture. The issue arises when, at a point in the story, a character in the game sort of forces your hand into doing something for them, and you don't get a choice in the matter. You do an action that might not vibe with the rest of your choices you made. The moments where you were in control don't match the moments when it was outside of your control. When the game's writers took control from you and made a decision for your character that doesn't match your choices that you've made for your character. And this is where ludonarrative dissonance arose in the interview. And I'm sure we can all sort of think back to various video games we have played over the years where stuff happens that just pulls you out of the experience altogether. Whether that is you being in a quiet, serious, deathly stealth mission that anything could go wrong and everything could go to hell and the story would be ruined. And during these moments of gravity, maybe like some characters T-posing and glitching out in a physics glitch, and it just ruins all of the gravity of the situation. Or weird agency is pulled from you and the story goes in a weird direction that you wouldn't have picked for it to go on. Like, all these things happen all the time in video games. We could think of them for a minute. However, I posit that this also applies to wargames, to tabletop wargames or tabletop RPGs. I was aware of the idea of ludonarrative dissonance in college when I was just looking up some game design stuff, but I did not really come to connect it to the idea of wargaming until Vince Ventrella, wonderful channel, a lot of great paint tutorials, and also purveyor of the delightful Warhammer Weekly Age of Sigmar show, brought up the idea on his podcast and introduced that, this doesn't just apply to video games, it applies here. And I cannot possibly agree more. And I think here, for me at least, it is foundational. It is core to my enjoyment of some of these games. This is something that I think at a game design level matters, but I think for a player enjoyment level matters even more. Especially if you are someone who leans more towards the lore and the books and the hobby side. This could matter a lot to you, as opposed to just raw math and mechanics and efficiency. But I feel like, to really explain this thing, if you've never played BioShock, that example won't mean anything to you. So, to avoid just throwing shade on any tabletop wargaming game, I would like to just make my own little thing here, and then use it as an example. We're going to homebrew our own race for a tabletop skirmish game that we're going to make for just a minute. Because I don't want to just throw shade on other designers or companies, because game design's hard, y'all. You're hitting a bajillion moving targets. You never have enough time to do what you want to do. And you never have enough time to do as much testing as you would ever want. It's something that's difficult, and I just don't want to be dunking on people for those constraints. So, our own bespoke example. Let's say that I am making a new tabletop war game that's a skirmish level game where you are going to pick a band of warriors to do battle with other bands of warriors in a medium to high fantasy setting that is set in a sort of pioneer time where people are just starting to get into flintlocks and rifles, but they don't have anywhere near the idea of machine guns and whatnot. Also, there is magic in the world, but it isn't a Dio album cover wall of weeping subwoofers levels of high fantasy. And let's say that in this world, on the western side of the continent, inspired by my trip to South Dakota, let's say we wanted to make a band of bulls, a species of large, 15-foot tall bull creatures who dot the western plains and mountains, and are known for their prodigious size and strength. Travelers who head west to the main cities, on the long trek, oftentimes tell tales and legends of people who were heading west and had their wagons break, snap an axle or a wheel, and while stuck, could not get the wagon lifted, didn't have the equipment to do so, but would find a wandering bull who would lift the wagon easily, allowing it to be fixed, and wave them on their way. These tales of their strength became legend, and the bulls became known as strong as a mountain. Secondarily, there are legends of bulls who were found not walking, but laying on the roads of these wagon trails. Upon coming up to them, there would be travelers who would say that they thought that they were dead, that they were corpses, surrounded in a pool of their own blood, sometimes missing whole limbs, unmoving in the dusty, grassy trail. But when the wagon train stopped and walked forward, they realized the bull was still breathing. They were exhausted. They were in pain. They were injured. But they were still alive and managed to wander to one of these trails, hoping to find medical attention after being damaged or almost killed by one of the many, many large beasts that dot the landscape. And after receiving a medical attention, were able to get up and walk away. Again, the bulls now become legend for their constitution and their strength. Now, as we continue to forge this little narrative of the bulls, let's say there are also stories that arise from people heading west. Those who went west when they were young, they were children. Maybe you were 8 years old when you were a young girl heading west. And you came across 2 bulls on your path west, one older, one younger. They're very distinctive in their markings and their symbolism and glyphs that they choose to wear. Their armor that is personalized just for them. Their horns or antlers and how they looked. The bulls were very distinct in their appearance. And a young girl heading west saw the 2 bulls that their train interacted with and traded with, and remembered them for her whole life until she was in her early 40s and traveling again. This time, a fully grown woman. But as she traveled, they stopped. And she remembered from her childhood these same bulls. And they were the same bulls. Hardly changed by all of the years that had seen her grow from a young girl to a fully grown woman with her own children. Now we've started to build a legend that these bulls are strong, they are incredibly durable, but they are also long-lived. They have a long lifespan, over which they age quite slowly. Now also, let's say this story continues on. We run with the idea of these legends building the foundation for the bulls, and now we also talk about how that affects their life, their community. Maybe these bulls, because they live so long, they're kind of like elephants. Maybe because they live a long time, it also is hard for them to have children often. Maybe they have a long gestation period where a female bull would be pregnant for years to have a young calf. Rather than, the 9 months for humans, maybe for them it's 2-3 years for a young calf to be born. And when that happens, maybe they also take a long time to grow up. That these calves not only are rare when they do come to a village, but also then slow to grow and vulnerable, which makes the need for the village to be careful with them all the higher. With that being the case, if you take a long time to have children, they grow slowly, and when they do, they take a long time to raise and to teach. What that tells me is that now the bulls are very rare in these lands. That they are strong and they are durable, but there are very few of them by comparison to the other races. Compared to humans or dwarves or halflings or whatever else you want to put in there. The other sentient species, that they take a long time to grow, so there are not many of them. Again, now we're expanding this story more and more. This part you don't get to interact with. We're building our lore for the bulls. So if there aren't many of them, how do they survive? Because being strong and tough is really good, but if you don't have enough people to gather food for your caloric needs, then you're going to be doomed as a species. How would they react? Let's say that these bulls are spirit whisperers, that through the whispers of the winds and the howling between the hollows, these bulls can hear into the other realm, that they can, just beyond sight and perception of the physical, sense into the ephemeral. That they can hear what's coming through the whispers of the great and small spirits of the beyond, and can, those who are gifted, speak back to them in return, can make bargains with them in return, can make friendships with these spirits in return. And in doing so, become quite prodigious workers of magic, summoning spirits from the beyond to help them scout for dangers so that they could stay safe, keeping their small numbers more protected. Maybe they can also use these spirits to gather resources, to go to places where they couldn't and bring them things that they could not physically get because they don't have enough hands. Also, perhaps this makes them incredibly adept at healing magics, allowing their natural constitution to be furthered even more in terms of what a bull can survive in their lives and what sort of trials they can undergo. You know, even being totally ravaged on the brink of death, if you are a skilled spirit talker and can speak to nourishing spirits of the beyond, might not be a death sentence like it would be for other races, making these bulls now even more able to accommodate their sort of inherent drawback of a slow, long life and slow birth rates. It also allows the narrative to grow more, that they are not only rare, but they are pretty prodigious in their use of magic and spirits, and can maybe summon them from the beyond. All of this together, as we talk about these bulls, start to sort of coalesce into the mind, and hopefully, in good game design at least, not necessarily off the dome game design, start to build a species that has some character in your brain, that speaks to you in some way. If you are hearing me talk about this and you go, damn, that's kind of a faction I want to play. It's because in good game design, pitches like that are outside of your control, that are in the fluff, that are in the narrative, that are in the models, that are in the sort of paint jobs, all of those things call to people. They're like a siren song that reaches out to you and resonates to you either on a mechanical level of what you think that mechanics might end up being that fits your vibe, that might speak to you on a narrative level that appeals to you and your preference in stories and species and settings, or maybe speaks to you on an emotional level that maybe speaks to your own experiences or your own trials, your own struggles, your own harsh life realities that you've overcome and that you can relate to. And in the best cases, all of those things really jive, and they pull a person towards a faction in a beautiful, beautiful harmony that is like peak satisfaction when everything aligns for you. And if all of that happened, let's say you want to play the Bulls. You want to play Joe's coolest game, well, Joe's like dopest game of all time, trademark pending. You decide you want to get into it. You want to get some of these bull miniatures. You want to play it on the tabletop with your friends. You want to be a bull main. In that case, you would sit down with a friend and you would go, okay, let's play our first game. I want to play my bulls. And you go to put these on the table after hearing the story. And you start to build your list. But let's say it doesn't match your pre-based assumptions from the lore. Let's say, for example, you went to go build your list and you were expecting a rather elite force because the bulls are quite rare. They breed slowly. They don't have a high population. But maybe you get to the tabletop and your friend has 20 miniatures and you have 40 miniatures. Every bull is really, really, really cheap. They don't cost hardly anything to put on the table. You have a lot of them. Okay, that's weird. Why? Your brain is going to start questioning why. But maybe it's not enough to totally pull you out of it. You just go, oh, that's kind of odd. All right, let's keep on going. And then you build your little army and you put it on the table and you go to have your first interaction. And you find out that, like, you have a big bull with an axe who goes to swing into an enemy. And maybe he has a really low strength stat. Well, that's kind of weird for the wagon train stories. We kind of expected him to be absolutely yoked, but all right, that's weird. And then your opponent goes to hit you back. You're like, oh, okay, that's fine. We're really, 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 really tough. Like we talked about the guy losing a limb and stuff. Like they're really, really, really tough. We're gonna be fine. And then you find out he's not built like a brick house. He's built like a pile of twigs. And just gets obliterated by a tiny little nobody human with a short sword. Again, now the narrative is clashing more and more. And then finally, you go to use your hero's abilities, and you see that they only have a dinky magic spell. And that dinky magic spell is only a magic missile, and you have to jump through 5 hoops to get to the magic missile. Why? But at this point, you'll start asking yourself, why? Why is this like this? The stuff that you're feeling is going to be confusion, maybe frustration, maybe anger. Those moments where the stuff that you can't control, the fluff, the minis, the lore, the vibe, essentially, doesn't match with the stuff you can control. The gameplay elements, the choices you make, the units that you can pick, and those things don't vibe, and that creates those weird feelings. That's the ludonarrative dissonance. That's where it all comes full circle. And it probably happens to you all the time. It happens rather often. Normally, hopefully, in the best ways, it is small. You come across an aspect, maybe two aspects that don't quite line up, and you go, oh, that's kind of weird. But it doesn't totally pull you out of your fun of the faction, or the army, or the playstyle, or whatever it is. It just creates some friction. But I think for many people, this is more core to their enjoyment than they would think. I think, especially for people who watch us, this is something that really could be at the center of what draws you to armies, of what gives you a good time. I think there's an issue sometimes in content creation in our communities, and that a lot of content that's created is by people who are really, really passionate, which means oftentimes those are people who are in the competitive scene and who are really, really passionate enough to go to tournaments all over the world. And people at that level of passion are wonderful, and they are going to share their passion of their favorite games with you, which is wonderful. But they're largely doing it in terms of competitive stuff and statistical efficiency. How strong are these rules? How winning are these rules? And if the rules for a game are not winning, they don't really think about them much. They don't really care for them because it doesn't fit their big goal, and that is to be efficient and to do the most efficient thing. And that's fine. That's a perfectly valid way to enjoy wargames. It's just, when that is the anchor for a lot of these conversations, when that is the subconscious presumed assumption of a lot of these conversations, I think nuance is lost. Because I'm going to be honest with you, I don't think most people having just efficiency is what matters. I think for many people, concepts like this, like ludonarrative dissonance, can decide whether or not you're having a great time with a faction in a game or not. Because you're not just here for going to competitive things. Most people will never go to a competitive tournament in their life. They're just going to play games at their local shop or in their pickup group, and they're going to have fun. Maybe you're just a hobby hero. You just want to paint minis. In that case, you're not here for stats at all. You're here for vibes. You're here for the stuff that you resonate with the most. You're totally detached from all of that other stuff. In that case, this matters more. Concepts like this, which are more personalized, what draws you to a game as a person, not as like a stat sheet, matters a lot. And when possible, I want to try to point to these things and explain what they are and how they might affect you. And at times, try to give you advice on how to handle them if you do start to feel issues with them. Here it's a little tough, because again, the whole base of ludonarrative dissonance is that the stuff you do control or can control clashes with the stuff you can't control. And I'm going to be honest, most of it you can't control. It's in the hands of designers and developers, people who make decisions way above you. But I do think there are some things you can try to do, there's some things I try to do, that could help you if you start to feel a little off. First things first, I think the most foundational thing that matters from this, and I hope really works for you the most, the thing I want you to walk away with, number one, is that you can identify this in your games. When you go to play a game with an army that's maybe got new rules, or it's your first time playing an army, and you start to feel something is off, the vibes are off, and you don't know what that is, it's just at your fingertips. Ask yourself, is this ludonarrative dissonance? Did I expect an elite army, and now there's way too much crap on my table? Did I expect a fighty army? And now I'm finding that they don't win battles. Did I expect a shooting army? And all of a sudden I have a bunch of like chain swords. Try to ask yourself, is this it? That's step one. If you can identify it, I think how to react gets so overwhelmingly easier because you've at least been able to point your finger at it and say, this is the thing. Second, if you can identify that there is some weird ludonarrative dissonance happening. Two, can you identify what it is? For example, is it the size of the army? Can you get down to if it is a playstyle choice? Can you get down to, I just don't think the subfaction vibes for me? Is it, I don't really like this general. It doesn't match the vibe. Whatever that is, can you get down to what the specific things are? If so, wonderful. Now the bulk of the work is done. Because honestly, I think just being able to identify the problem, knowing is half the battle. And in this case, maybe more. And that is the most important tool you can have in this toolbox. Now, let's assume you're able to identify what it is. What do you do about it? Well, it kind of depends on how much this affects you. Because for some people, this will be annoying, but it won't necessarily deeply damage their enjoyment. For others, it will damage it heavily, in which case you're sort of more compelled to respond. So, you need very particular responses depending on your level of annoyance, but if you do find that it is dissonance and you do find what that thing is, just see if you can work around it. For example, if one particular character as your leader doesn't work for you, is there another character you could take as your leader? Will that give you a different playstyle? And will that fit what you expect and what you want? Can you pick a different sub-faction? If this one doesn't work for you, can you pivot and do another one? And will that fix your sort of quibble? Could you pick another set of units that are maybe, if you think there's too much crap on the table, if you maybe can pick another unit that has a higher points cost and lower your number of stuff on the table, could you do that? If so, do so. Work around it. Once you know what your hangups are, it's easier for you to try to accommodate them in the wider game in your own decisions. And let's say, though, you end up with a situation where you know what it is, but there are no builds around it. It's foundational. There's no other options. Maybe there's only one play style. Maybe this thing is just going to be what it is. In that case, you can try to shift your anchor and your expectations. I have found that this doesn't really work for me, but you can give it a whirl to try to see if you can bring your expectation in alignment with what it is. Maybe you have better success than I do. But if so, great. Now you're in alignment. Keep on going. Have a good time. If not, this is the moment where if you start to feel the frustration growing, and there's nowhere for you to change to make this better for yourself, where I would recommend maybe just taking a step away from that faction, maybe that game, and rotating back. Because if there's one thing I can guarantee in time, it is that games will change. The designers are always going to see things that they want to improve on, and that they want to streamline, or maybe they want to add options to, or maybe they want to fundamentally redesign from the ground up. It's just that thing is going to take a little time. But it will change. The faction that is not vibing for you will change. I don't know to what extent or what way, but it will change. And if you cannot work your way around it, I think it is really healthy for you, and at least in my experience for me, to just set it down, step away. Play another faction. Maybe play another game in your playgroup. That's cool too. Whatever works. This has happened to me in a number of occasions with multiple games. It's just something that happens. And you can just rotate around to keep the fun going. And keep an eye on it, and maybe eventually it will shift again and it'll come back around to fit the playstyle you expected, or the story you expected, or the miniatures you expected, or what have you. And the ludonarrative dissonance will no longer be nearly so much of a problem. But truly, first step is you got to be able to identify it. And for this one, I am really interested to hear, one, if you all have questions about this. I am more than happy to sort of explain more, and if this is still a little too obtuse, because I get it can be. And two, is this something that, one, you knew about before, but two, that you feel like affects your games? As I said, this is kind of on the spectrum, and for some people is a huge deal. For some people, doesn't matter at all. And then for most people, are probably somewhere in between. And I have no idea where the general anchor point is at. I would love to hear if this is something that affects you out there in listener land. If so, please share it on YouTube or on Instagram, which we're doing a big push for. I would very much appreciate it just to hear y'all's opinions. Also, if you could take your time to like and subscribe, share the video, truly, y'all, it helps an immense amount to grow the channel. And people doing it have just helped us reach more and more folks by the week, and it's incredible. And I thank y'all, and if you would do it, I would very much appreciate it. I'm going to be over here continually pumping out stuff, so you guys will see the content continue to arrive, but give us a little bit of time. Trying to adjust to a one-person show for a touch can be a time a little odd. So I deeply appreciate your patience, and hope y'all are doing well out there. For now, that's been all of my opinions, bona fide and Kentucky Fried. I'll see you on the next one.